Vasiliki Scurfield, the mother of the British ex-Royal Marine who died in Syria fighting against the Islamic State, has spoken for the first time. At a reception in Parliament, she gave an emotional speech.
Costa was not a mercenary. He wasn't an out-of-work soldier looking for an adventure or something to do to pass the time. And although this is not a way that many of us would have had him choose, it was the way he considered the best for him, and I'm proud of him for finding the courage to do this. He went out to oppose so-called IS, of course, but really he went out to support the fundamental rights of every human being to live in their own country with a government they have chosen rather than one imposed on them by religious ideology. The right to worship the God of their choice in the way they choose, to celebrate their own culture and language, to read and speak freely, to make music and enjoy art or play football without fear of brutal execution. In other words, he was a humanitarian.
Her speech comes a few days after Konstandinos' coffin was handed over to his father in a ceremony involving hundreds of Syrian Kurds and expected to arrive in the UK within days.
Costa may not have been supporting British political interests with his actions, but he was certainly supporting British values. Values that are pretty standard. Values that are pretty standard across the Western world and that we take for granted. Being brought up to think critically and having acquired a set of specific and valuable skills, he decided that it was cowardly to stand by on the sidelines, so he went to do what he could and what he believed was right. In our family, we have always believed that if something needs to be done, you step up and get it done rather than wait for someone else to do it. And he did exactly that, in the end giving his life for these values. He was one small drop in a massive ocean, but he has caused big ripples.
Vasiliki asked the governments and the media to name and shame anyone who's supporting the Islamic State.
And now I ask that the governments and media across the world turn their attention to so-called IS. Shine the spotlight on them so brightly that there is no shadow deep enough for them to hide. Name and shame every government and politician that supports this organization, either covertly or overtly, and ensure they are sanctioned. Name and shame every organization that sells them weapons, buys their oil, or does any business with them at all, and ensure strong penalties. Self-titled IS needs two things in order to continue their foul work. They need people and they need money. Let's think creatively about how we can cut off their supplies of both, even if it means rethinking treaties.
Then she asked British citizens to raise their concern over the Islamic State and asked their MPs to help the Kurds in Syria.
Not everyone can be a Costa, but there are elections coming up. If you are feeling politically apathetic, but have strong feelings about self-titled IS, then here is a cause and a clear reason to get involved. Ask your MP what their view is. Ask what they are going to do about it. Ask what will be done to immediately secure a humanitarian corridor into Rojava so that the refugees who Costa helped can now have the aid they need. Ask what our government is going to do to support the work of Morgans Luktoft, the Danish MP, who says that strong action is needed to ensure thousands of women who have been taken captive and are being sold to rich businessmen are returned to their former lives. Ask your MPs what they are going to do to ensure that pressure is put on countries where these women are being trafficked, to ensure that it ceases and they are returned. Ask why we are not supporting the Rojavan Kurds at the front line in Syria by, at the very least, equipping them with defensive equipment such as bulletproof vests and night vision goggles. These Rojavan Kurds are the 300 Spartans fighting the massive Persian army. They are inadequately equipped, but armed with spirit, conviction, and the desire to protect home and hearth, they have shown that so-called IS is not invincible, and they have halted its advance. We owe them as much help as we can. Let's stop standing by, and let's instead think creatively about grinding down and putting out the biggest threat to the world since the Nazis.
Sarah Harris for NRT, London.